Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order tonight's Board of Finance Budget Workshop meeting for Thursday, March 7, 2024. Before we begin our formal agenda this evening, I'd like to take a moment to provide a bit of an introduction to tonight's proceedings and the structure of the meeting. Tonight, as we do at all of our regular meetings, we will begin and end with public forum. And in between the public forums will be the one other agenda item that we have on our meeting tonight, or for our meeting tonight, to consider and take possible action on the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. During our Tuesday night public budget hearing, there were presentations on the town budget from First Selectman Matt Hoey and the Board of Education budget from Superintendent Dr. Paul Freeman and Board of Education Chairwoman Dr. Katie Bell-Stracy. We also offered the opportunity for the public to ask questions of town and school officials and provide comments at the end with public forum. To be clear, the public may make comments during public forum this evening, but as this is a Board of Finance workshop, there will only be questions and dialogue between Board of Finance members and town Board of Education representatives. If you are joining us by Zoom, first, thank you again for participating. And you may have noticed that you have been placed on mute to limit any unintended noise distractions. When I open up the public forum, we will individually unmute those who wish to make a comment virtually, up to 3 minutes, but ask that members of the public, should they want to speak, use the raise hand function to identify themselves. Those here at the community center in this room should simply raise their hand to be recognized to speak. And before making your comments, please state your name and address and be as clear and concise as possible so the microphones in the room can pick you up. I would like to note for the record that I believe the Board of Finance through the town website has not received any written correspondence regarding the budget as of 5 p.m. this evening through the active address that was provided by the town. At this time, I would like to move on to item number 1, public forum. Anybody who wishes to address the Board of Finance, please raise your hand physically or virtually to be recognized. Please be sure to state your name and address, limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and speak clearly and concisely, again, so the microphones can pick up your voice. Come on up. This is a new meeting, so you're going to have to say your name and address again.
Okay. No problem.
Good evening, Chris. How are you?
My name is Christopher Breton. I live here in Guilford at 20 Trailwood Drive. I just want to read a statement I had prepared. Across the United States, the number one complaint is the inflation and the impact it has had on us taxpayers. The current White House administration is under the gun due to the inflation and the rise of interest rates to get it under control. Everything now costs a whole lot more than it ever has, and it seems that every time we go to Big Y, or fill up our tanks at the gas pump, or open our Eversource bills, or attempt to get a car loan, the amount of the increase has a big impact on our home budgets. Now we are on the precipice of a new town budget. We, as the townspeople, need to ensure that we do not contribute to this pain, but we have a duty to ensure we spend enough to make certain the success of our town. The proposal by the Board of Selectmen of 2.99% increase, I feel, is reasonable and fiscally appears to be responsible. The budget that has been suggested by the Board of Education for a 5.08% is too much, and combined with the town budget would raise my taxes over 7% compared to last year. This, coupled with last year's 19% increase in my taxes due to the reassessment of my house, is not just painful, but not thoughtful. I do understand that the superintendent of our schools has a responsibility to present a budget that is inflated so that he can, after cuts to it, get what is needed. I feel that the total of the two budgets should put the mill rate at no more than 26.79. This way, the taxpayers only see a 3.5% increase in their tax bills. This can be done by reducing the BOE proposed budget to meet this mill rate. As admitted by the BOE, the number of students enrolled has decreased by 9.2% since 2016, but their budget has increased by 4.98% on average per year over the last 2 years. I would suggest looking at the cost drivers first and reducing the expenditures on those. First off, salaries. There is no guarantee that enrollment will increase anytime soon. So the number of employee positions should be decreased. This can be done by attrition through offering early retirement, and as people resign and leave, not filling these vacant positions. Second, transportation. Rarely, if ever, buses are used to capacity. It seems that many parents shuttle their children to school, and high schoolers use their own cars. I would suggest that the BOE do an analysis or study on how many children take the bus and how many routes exist, and can they consolidate or go to smaller buses or vans to reduce the costs. Next, the budget does not include any of the investments suggested by the BOE budget proposal, except maybe the safety monitors. These are just a few suggestions to decrease the budget. I'm sure there are others. I know many of us have had to do the same when budgets were cut at our places of work throughout our careers. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wishing to address the Board of Finance? Anybody on Zoom? I'll do my old going once, going twice. Moving on. Agenda item number 2, consider and take possible action on the proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 budget. At this point, I would like to provide a brief recap of where we are on the town and school budgets, the revenue projections, the anticipated mill rate, and bonding recommendations since we were last together on Tuesday night. This will be somewhat repetitive at the end of Tuesday night, but I think for those who are tuning in, I guess, newly for this particular meeting, or need a remembrance of the numbers, which is actually not surprising, because it can get complicated, I will do so now. The Board of Selectmen has requested an operating budget of $37,056,226, or a 3.85% increase over last year. The town debt service budget request of $10,166,847 is a reduction of $292, or basically flat from last year. When you combine those two, the requested town budget increase is 2.99%. The Board of Education has requested an operating budget of $72,157,151, or a 5.08% increase over last year. The total combined town and school budget requested is $119,380,224, or a 4.25% increase over last fiscal year. On the revenue side, projected non-tax revenue will increase $201,729, or that equals a 2.57% increase from last year, and this largely due to an expected increase in interest income over last year's budget. Regarding the grand list, and unlike last year's significant increase due to revaluation, I always say reval, but revaluation in the fall of 2022, the total net taxable grand list before adjustments by the Board of Assessment Appeals increased only 0.03%. In comparison, because we really can't compare to last year because of the reval, the 2021 grand list increase was 2.23%, and the 2020 grand list increase was 1.42%. So the slight increase for 2023 will result in nearly no mill rate offset to the budgets presented. With the 2023 grand list figure, based on the budgets and revenue projections that have been presented Tuesday night, the projected mill rate would go up from 25.88 to 27.00, or a 4.32% increase from last year. We also heard about capital bond authorization requests, and the Board of Education is requesting an amount of $2,452,080 for 5 items discussed on Tuesday evening. Pipe and unit vent and oil tank replacement at Melissa Jones, tennis court replacement at Guilford Lakes, school repeaters at Guilford High School, Baldwin Middle School, and Adams Middle School, district-wide fiber install and infrastructure upgrades, and architectural and engineering services for future projects. On the town side, I would remind everyone that the capital bond authorizations are made as a 2-year request And so this year is the off-cycle year, so there is no request this year from the town. And as we all know as a board, the backup documents to everything just summarized may be found on our board pack tablets, as well as in the responses to questions posed by members of this board, and most of the presentations have all been made public by the Board of Education and by the town. That is my summary. So I will now stop talking, except that we will begin first with questions we have regarding the Board of Education budget and capital bonding requests, and direct them to Superintendent Dr. Freeman and Chairwoman Dr. Balistraci for response. So, Board of Finance, questions for the Board of Education regarding their budget? And if anybody doesn't want to start, I certainly will.
I have some too.
Should
Should-
we also note that we,
Yes, hold on, yes?
we also received a lot of answers
Yeah, 2
to a
questions.
number of questions, so do you want to make that note? 'Cause
we-
we all have them in our email.
Yes, I know, well, I know that Tuesday night, and I'll repeat it, there were lots of questions that the Board of Education and this board asked of the board, of the school system, and I know I thanked Linda for her diligent work with her team and with staff to answer those questions, as did the town and Mary Jane and her staff regarding questions. I know that there was a question that was asked late today that was answered and was posted as part of the questions. I don't believe there were any other new questions besides the one asked today, but all the other questions were, I think we all have them from Tuesday. I don't think there were any other new questions, and as I mentioned, there's no comments or questions from the website, from the town. So, but thank you for the reminder, because it's good for anybody who
Yeah. I just
doesn't know
wanted
that
to
there
know
have been
that,
numerous
yeah.
questions that have been asked and answered, so. With that, Jonathan, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I want to, oh, go ahead.
I would just be, yeah,
Yeah, because you got the microphone.
I think,
so-
yeah, you've got the microphone here, it'd be easier for Michael who's taping it, and the vocal probably will be better. And
Come on up.
we'll ask the same of the town when the town, we won't go back and forth there, we're gonna stick with the school right now. Thank you. Thank you, John. Go ahead.
So, always at the top of the list is the new hires, because this is a commitment over the years for millions of dollars for taxpayers. I want to clarify which positions were added in 23, 24. One of the answers to the question, we were asking about some teachers that might be coming off the ESSER grant, and he actually mentioned that English language teacher was taken off of the ESSER grant. I believe that was last year.
Last year.
So how much change to the budget did that affect? Because I didn't see that on the new hire list.
That position is built into the operating budget currently, so that was part of last year's budget proposal. We pulled that position out of the ESSER grant and moved that position into the operational budget. So again, I think that Mr. Ailes, or Dr. Balistraci and Mr. Ailes, I think were both mentioning Tuesday night. We originally built probably 4 to 5 positions into the ESSER dollars. We slowly pulled those positions into the operating budget so that this year we would not be sitting on a cliff and asking for 5 positions that all became unfunded and all needed to move into the operating budget at the same time. So this year, in this budget request in front of us, the only 2 positions that are still currently funded by ESSER that we are asking to build into next year's budget position are the district-wide school social worker and the district-wide school psychologist position. The ELL
So
teacher moved in previously.
Still just focused though on the EL teacher. It said that the budget was to include a school psychologist into the budget and leave a social worker position and an ELL teacher in the ESSER grant, but we were notified of another grant, the school mental health grant, so we switched the EL teacher into the budget.
Yes,
Yes.
last year, so they're
Last
on
year.
the budget now.
So this teacher was on an ESSER grant, but then you switched them to the budget.
Correct.
And how much extra did that cost, not being covered by the ESSER grant, now covered by the budget?
It was part of last year's budget proposal. It is currently built into this year's operating budget, and it would be that individual's salary. So I am going to estimate that that is probably going to be in the ballpark of $70,000 to $80,000 without having that specific salary in front of me tonight.
Okay. And then I had some notes that a special education teacher was added to Lakes in 23-24. Was that not accurate?
I'm sure it was. That was, again, that was last year's budget proposal. These aren't positions that we're talking about in the budget proposal that sits in front of you tonight. Just to be clear, you're asking about positions that changed last year into the current operating budget.
But these are still new positions, right? Like, we didn't have them in the original budget. They were added during the year. That's my question.
This current year, no.
Not this budget, but
he's talking about the kindergarten teacher for Lakes and the
Right.
special ed.
So the only positions that were added into this 23-24 school year that were not part of the approved budget last year were a kindergarten position at Lakes and then a special education position at Baldwin. And those were both in response to unexpected enrollment changes that occurred over the course of the summer.
so from last night's presentation, I also noted that there was a social worker, district social worker added.
From
From the
that
ESSER
person's
grant.
coming off the ESSER grant,
Another one coming off the ESSER, and then a school psychologist at the district level.
coming off the ESSER grant.
Those are the only two positions that are currently still funded by the ESSER grant and certified teaching category that we are asking to move into next year's operating budget.
So last year covered by ESSER, this year,
Currently covered by ESSER in this year today, but won't be covered in next year, and that's why we're asking to add them to next year's operating budget, as well as the kindergarten teacher at Lakes and the special education teacher at Baldwin.
still, I'm sorry, I'm still confused about the English language teacher. Were they initially included in the 23-24 budget, or were they paid with ESSER and then they became
They-
part of the budget?
They were,
Because-
again, they were paid with ESSER funds. We had a calendar of how we were going to bring the ESSER-funded positions into the operating budget over a span of 3 years. There was a change made to that calendar because there was a mental health grant offered by the state, and we wrote to try to land that competitive mental health grant that would have been able to be applied to a social worker and a school psychologist. We would not have been able to apply it to an ELL teacher. So last year at this time, we changed the plan to bring the social worker in first and hold the ELL teacher to the end. We brought the ELL teacher in earlier, wrote twice to try to land a competitive state grant that would have pushed these two positions another year down the road with grant funding. We were not awarded that grant in either of the applications that we made. So at this point, they have to come in. We were trying to extend the grant funding. That's the reason for the change in ELL and social worker.
So for all of last year, the English language teacher was covered by ESSER.
Yes, and this year is not any longer correct.
Okay, so that's going to be a new hire for this year.
No, already in the budget. It was a new hire last year. She is working and being paid under the operation budget this year.
I think we're splitting hairs. She's going to be paid out of the budget this year as opposed to ESSER grants from last
She
year.
is currently, right now,
Being
during the
paid.
current budget, being paid by by the operating budget. So it is not a change for next year's budget.
Okay, so she didn't switch from ESSER to the operating budget.
She did last
It
year.
won't be now.
It's just the timeline, Jonathan. I think
It's
it's just your timeline is off.
I'm just trying to understand if this is an extra staffing.
not
No,
this year.
the ELL
Not this
position
year.
is not affecting this year's budget
Yeah,
discussion.
not this year. It's already in the operating budget. So
And
it
that
won't
was
be a
part of the
change.
initial 23-24 budget. They weren't
Correct.
supposed to be paid by ESSER
So
and
go
it
back to
switched.
like
Nope.
22, 23.
Yeah, that's right.
You gotta go back one, I think, for your timeline.
Yeah.
To 22, 23. And that's where I think the
The change.
confusion is and the change.
So it's before 23-24.
Yes,
Yes, yep.
Okay.
It's just the source of funds changed.
correct.
Special ed teacher from Lakes, same thing, not added last year?
Yes, I believe that's accurate. The special ed teacher came in last year.
I think it was from Baldwin, according to this, it indicates it was from Baldwin.
This year, there was an
This year.
addition for Baldwin,
Yeah.
correct?
Last year it was from Lakes.
I don't have last year's
I don't have last
budget
year's
front of
numbers in
me.
front of me from last year, Jonathan, I apologize.
Okay, and then last year, did you add a school psychologist to Lakes?
It's hard to answer because you seem to be asking questions about the current operating budget that we were talking about last year. We don't have that in front of us. We have our budget for next year in front of us.
So my goal here is just to determine, compared to last year's initial budget, 23, 24, how many new positions are we now paying for on the budget?
If you
So
look-
if somebody switches from ESSER to budget, I consider that to be an addition.
So that's what this investment slide
Shows.
speaks to. It speaks about the certified staff that in the current year are covered in funds other than the operating budget, and then additional staff that are being sought to go into the operating budget.
We are requesting a net increase of 4.7 certified teaching positions in the 24-25 budget over the 23-24 budget. And that's what we came here tonight prepared to discuss. If you would like us to go back and give a more detailed timeline for the last 2 to 3 years, we can do that for you, but we're simply not prepared to do that tonight.
It was 6.7 and 2 world language elementary were removed.
Correct, for a net of
To make it
4.7.
4.7 net.
And I'm
You got five
referring to
paras.
slide 13 in the slide deck
Yeah.
that you should have in your
Yeah,
board
we'll
packs.
look at it.
Yes.
Five para
Okay.
throughout the district, 5
Correct.
paraprofessionals, 1.5 custodial, and 2 monitors.
And we
That's-
could
that's-
certainly go back and give you that breakdown for how we moved from 22-23 to this current 23-24 budget, and we could go back further than that. But again, I'm simply not, I didn't come here tonight.
Focus needs to be on this budget.
Correct. I'm happy to do that history for you if that's something that you're interested in.
I'm just concerned that if people get added in the previous year, then they end up in this year as adds too. It's just that the budget money
They're
from
not
last
added,
year
they're already in the
covered.
budget.
They're already in the
It's
budget.
already been identified.
Done deal.
That's not true. If someone's on ESSER and they switch them in 23, 24, then they become part of the budget for this year and last year. It's just that the additional budget money from last year covered the position.
You're confusing bodies with dollars. It's the same number of bodies, just different source of dollars.
Okay, maybe that's true.
No, just-
I've come up with a few more FTEs than 4.7 though. I think in your presentation, you've got the 4, you got also the 5 pairs, that's 9.
So again, Jonathan, if you refer to slide 13, it's a net increase of 4.7 certified teaching positions. We've asked for 6.7 new, and we've reduced 2 positions to offset that increase. We've then asked for an increase of 5 paraclerical positions. We've asked for an increase of 1.5 custodial and maintenance positions, and we have asked for an increase of 2 safety monitor positions. And slide 13 breaks that out in each of those categories.
Okay, I think I get the disconnect. So you're saying certified is 4.7.
Correct.
Right.
If you consider uncertified, it's a higher amount.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, okay. I think I missed that subtlety. I'm counting, many more FTEs than that.
Maybe you're looking here. All right.
Want to borrow a board copy?
Do you want, we've got it right here if you want to take a look at it.
I've got some notes from some other meetings and some other parts of the budget where I found some FTEs, so I'm always curious why they don't add up. Which kind of brings me to another question. The 2 safety monitors, I think at the top of your presentation, it says 105,000, but deeper into the budget, in the detail, it says 155,000. Is there a disconnect there?
There should be.
The number should be 105,000.
Under investment.
Right.
Clearly shows safety monitor district 105.
And if you look in the detail, though, for that part of the budget, it's going to say 155.
Direct us.
Huh, I gotta
We're
get my computer going
in
here.
in the questions? Was it part of the questions?
I was wondering which number was accurate.
105 is accurate.
Okay. So the safety monitors, 2 of them for 105 is actually more than the SRO at 45,000.
No, that's not correct, because we share the expense of the SRO with the police department. The school district is not paying the full salary of a police officer. We are making a contribution. When school is not in session, those officers are still Guilford patrol officers. So we contribute to the salary. Part of that salary will be carried in the police budget as well.
So I just wanted to do some math here, because I'm curious. The SRO, I thought, was going to be about 45,000 per SRO. Is that,
The split cost.
The
It's
split
like-
cost.
Yeah.
and so it's 90,000 for one SRO?
If the police department is carrying an equivalent cost, they might be carrying more than that. Officers may in fact make more than that. I'm not totally sure on that.
Okay, I'm trying to come up with like
Our
total
contribution
dollars
is
for all these
45,000.
new positions. So I'm trying
In the school budget, it would be
Get it. to get
45,000.
a budget.
But it's shared, it's a shared cost.
But the 45,000 is half of one SRO officer.
It is a portion. I'm not exactly sure if the police don't contribute more than half.
Okay?
Linda, did you want to, Linda Trudeau, go ahead.
I just want to
Just speak,
clarify-
just make sure you just speak up loud so that,
I just want to clarify, the budget line is 155 for the safety monitors and crossing guards. So there's other things in that line. There's also two existing positions from the high school that are included in that 155,000. The new investment for the two that we are adding is the 105.
Thank you, Linda.
So that's the clarification, the difference in the numbers.
Thank you.
Okay, I thought the two hall monitors were going to be converted to safety monitors. Got lost in that discussion somewhere.
if I could, because we're on that subject, one of the questions I was going to have tonight is just defining the difference between the safety monitor and the SRO. I don't think because most of us don't understand it, but for the public, because if you're hearing safety monitor and you're hearing SRO, well, are the safety monitors armed? And I know this has been addressed. I'd like it more for the public just so that they understand what the difference is.
I appreciate the question, and I'm happy to answer it. They could not be more different. An SRO is a school resource officer. An SRO is a badged and uniformed Guilford police officer, trained, hired, and supervised by the Guilford Police Department. They are assigned to a Guilford school patrol on the days that Guilford Public Schools are open. This doesn't mean that that officer only works 180 days, but when there are students in the schools, that officer is assigned to the Guilford Public Schools. They work for and they are Guilford police officers. They are uniformed, badged, and armed when they are on school property. A safety monitor is a position that was expanded this year and repackaged this year that had traditionally been called a hall monitor. A safety monitor is simply a Guilford Public Schools hourly employee that we hire to help us monitor student behavior and movement in the school system. We had traditionally only had 2 of those positions in the school system, and they were only assigned at the high school. When we think about our layered safety system, one of the most important parts is simply having real live human beings who are visible and available in the schools to help us monitor the space. And so they watch the student activity, they ensure that students are behaving responsibly and safely in the hallways. If they see an adult visitor in the building who isn't clearly wearing a labeled visitor's badge, they direct that person back to the main office to check in appropriately. They are there to help supervise activities that include opening the perimeter of our school. So things like arrival, dismissal, and recess. They're there to help supervise large events where we often invite community in. Things like assemblies or special student presentations, and they're there for the lunch wave during the day. They are essentially hall monitors, and we've extended the responsibilities slightly. They are not part of a security force. They are not trained as security guards. They are not armed. They are there to be liaisons between and among school officials, the public, and the students as they move around the buildings during the school day.
just to follow up, so the school resource officer, the Guilford Police Department officer, because they're spending the majority of their shift in the Guilford Public Schools, that is why
We
the Guilford
contribute to
Public
their
School
salary.
System is contributing to the cost of that school resource officer.
That is exactly right. The
Right.
police department, they are adding patrol officers to the daily schedule to support the schools, and that is why we contribute to the salary. But
Because
that-
their detail is the schools, not the rest of the town.
Correct.
When they're on their shift.
And those dollars are not, they do not flow out of our budget in a salary check that we cut to the officers. We send those dollars to the police department in the same way that we would if we hired on an additional police officer at a Friday night football game or traffic support. And so we issue that essentially as a contract payment to the police department. They pay their employed officers.
And then just to follow up on the school safety monitors, those are now strictly at the high school, and what you're doing is you're making them district-wide to go throughout from the elementary through the high school.
They were previously only at the high school. This year, because of the support of the town through ARPA funds, they are in all of our schools. And next year, as we look to bring them into the operational budget, we're probably going to shrink that a little bit because we will be taking on the cost in our operational budget. And so while this year we have a total of 8 in employment, we may not have that many unemployed in those positions next year.
Okay.
And again, this is an area where the board made a reduction to the budget as it was originally presented.
Right. Okay.
It was 6.
Yes.
And it's now 2.
Cut it.
It was 6 new for a total
That's
of
what,
8. Now
I'm
it's
sorry,
down
yes.
to
It
2
was 6
new
new.
for a
I'm
total
sorry.
of 4.
Didn't say new. Okay.
Correct.
Yes.
The board
And-
already cut it by 145,000.
Correct. And to be really, really clear, when the board made that reduction, we had a conversation about the fact that it may not necessarily be 2 full-time FTEs. We may use the available dollars differently or creatively to have part-time positions, to do something to provide the support of a hall monitor, but in a more creative way with a reduced funding source.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the question.
All right, I got a question about your
Could I? ask-
Oh, absolutely,
I just
sir.
want to make sure
Go ahead.
that we spread the questions around.
Great.
I'll get back to you.
Thanks.
Gotcha. Anybody on this side? We're going to go. Veronica? Please.
There was a question from the public earlier about transportation, and it brought to mind a conversation from several years ago, if I remember correctly. And that was, is it a state mandate, or we have to provide a seat for every enrolled child, whether they use the bus or not? Is that still
Yes.
true?
That is correct.
So the legislation has not changed. So, yeah.
And, well, and to go to that point, we've heard over numerous years that the routes, whenever there's a new bus company that's looked at, whether they're retaining a contract or we're looking at a new contract, they look at bus routes. Is that correct? To try to make it as efficient
Oh, absolutely.
as possible.
Absolutely.
But accommodating every single student in the school system by
We're required to make
mandate.
sure, right, that every student has a seat, because we cannot guarantee that the
Someone's
high
got to
school
cost.
student's car doesn't work, or the parent can't drive that day, or circumstances change more permanently and the child is regularly on the bus.
Yeah.
So we do not have the option of significantly cutting the number of buses to accommodate the kids that typically ride every day, because we need to accommodate the entire school population.
Which isn't to say that we don't, right, we do look at the number of students, particularly at the high school, who do ride the buses, and we reduce the number of buses and the number of routes because we know we will never be at capacity. So if there was ever a day at the high school where no parents drove and no students were allowed to drive, the buses would actually be overloaded. The other factor that impacts that is the length of the bus runs, and this is more impactful at the high school as well. Geographically, Guilford is one of the largest towns in the state of Connecticut, and if if we took that ratio and then ran bus runs and tried to fill every single seat, we would be running bus runs of 90 minutes or longer. About 6 years ago, we did contract with the district management group. So in addition to the companies running those studies every year, we did hire an outside organization and asked them to look at the bus runs for us. And so the length of the bus run has an impact as well. When a run starts to hit about an hour, we stop adding stops, and so we stop adding more bodies to that. And in bus companies, it would be really difficult to find smaller vehicles and do more runs, particularly with the driver shortage that is happening statewide as well.
But I can see how the general public would get.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
You see a bus
You see
that
it
looks
every day,
unfilled and
every-
it is frustrating,
you know.
absolutely.
Yeah, it's like everything.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so I understand that.
Megan?
And I don't know if this is a question for you or for the first selectman, but do you have any sense of if your ECS is going to change in the positive or negative?
We were advised at a CCM meeting this morning that the budget should remain flat. Randy Collins said, at this point, it does not look like we're going to see any cuts. If anything, there may be some more money coming in, but I think, as you know, the governor's trying to take some education money and move it to early childhood.
Right.
The legislature is pretty dead set against taking anything out of the ECS formulas, and everyone is being held harmless on the ECS formula. That's a projection.
So we should anticipate it
Staying
staying
the
the
same.
same?
Yeah,
And that's how it's budgeted in
Yeah.
our numbers.
Okay, I just wasn't sure because of that
It's a good question.
change.
Yeah,
If you were going to see a reduction or?
I think it's worth noting that every time the model is looked at, Guilford falls into a middle group that is projected to lose ECS income, and it is always then a Band-Aid of hold harmless that keeps us from losing those dollars. So if you were asking that question long-term,
Yeah.
we would likely see reduced funding in the long term. But every year, the short-term conversation, there is a hold harmless decision, and we get one more year grace before we start to see those reductions.
Over the years, the long-term conversation has been, don't plan on ECS long-term. It will go away.
But it keeps getting kicked down the road year by year.
Yeah.
I'd like to say it wasn't that long ago, but I think I had actually shared a document with Mike that it was 25 years ago, we received about 12% of our education budget in state support. We are now down around 1.5% to 2%, I think. That doesn't include excess costs for special ed, but, so
Yeah.
there's been a significant erosion over, in terms of not only the percent, but the real dollars.
I
Yeah.
still have it, by the way.
The percent of excess
Yeah,
cost
no,
is
I did.
really
It was-
shrinking
it was
every
10
year.
Yeah,
in
It was
ECS.
10.37%. It is now, well, it's in the twos. Can't say a percentage yet because we're not done with the whole process, so. That's a good question. All right, Amy, do you have anything while we're on this side? Amy, go ahead.
Three quick questions.
Sure.
With the special ed teacher that was added for Baldwin because of need this current year was 1 FTE, and you mentioned that there's 0.5 FTEs moving to Adams because there are students from Baldwin going to Adams, but the Baldwin one is not reducing by 0.5. Is that because of no needs, or is that just a contingency, or?
No, it's because we're seeing the needs increase, and it's both the number and the complexity of the students that we're supporting at those. So, right, we're not moving one to the other, we're adding both of
Okay.
the locations,
All right.
correct?
Number two, I'm curious, when you do have to add something like a kindergarten teacher mid-year, where does that money come from? Maybe that's not an easy question, but.
So every year at the end of the school year, through Linda's office, we end up moving monies to balance the 7 major categories. And so, a $72 million budget is a projection, and every year there will be some areas that are overspent, other areas that come in underspent. Up until the last 3 or 4 years, we were implementing freezes on material and equipment purchases. In some years, those freezes went into place as early as October. We have done much better than that in the last several years, but the budget number, even for salary, is a projection. And so at times, as we get into hiring season, we may be able to hire at a slightly lower step on the scale, on the salary scale, and therefore have a little monies that are left unspent in the salary line. Those would be the first line that we look at to shift over. It's really unusual, but in the last 2 or 3 years, we've actually come in under projection on things like special education tuition. So again, that would be something that as we get to the end of the year, we will move monies from one of those underspent categories into the salary line to cover those positions. So even though we put them in early, Linda's office and I were meeting regularly as we're building this budget proposal. We're watching this year's projections for the end of the year, and we will make sure that we will come in on budget, even if it means reducing spending or freezing spending in other areas to cover those positions that were put in.
And just for the public, the Board of Ed is looking at finances every month, and then we need to approve those transfers before the end of the fiscal year from one of those major 7 budget areas to another.
My third question was, it was addressed in the question from the Board of Ed, was question number 35 for anyone's listening. It was about the $90,000 in the budget for site improvements of $595, and has that been taken out, or is that still in there?
So what what the Board of Ed did in conversation with the administration, when we recognized that 90,000 was able to be covered appropriately through a related bond, we determined that we needed to take that off the site improvement list. But instead of removing the full 90,000, the board chose to reduce by 30,000 because we recognized that site improvement line has been over budget consistently for the last several years. So we determined that we would not take the full 90 out, we would take 30 out, and our facilities director is going to identify in a very long list of projects that didn't make that list what would be added on.
This side. Yes, Bob.
I'm embarrassed to ask you this. I should know this, but it's not in the presentation. This afternoon, somebody asked me this. And I said I'd ask, how many employees total, full and part-time, are, oh no, so Linda, sorry.
600, somewhere in that area. Don't know the exact number.
Right, ballpark.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
600
is it there?
full and part-time.
I didn't have time to look it up.
Yep.
Okay, just for the guy who asked me. Thank you.
I'll ask a question, then Jonathan, I know you're next.
Sure.
Just on the athletic investments, which sports are left to fully fund after this particular proposed increase?
So that
What's
is not
left
as
to fund?
simple a question as it seems. So
I didn't think so.
Right off the bat, crew would be the first
Okay.
sport that I would mention. Now, crew is a unique program under Guilford Athletics. Crew exists both as a Guilford community club, and it is a standalone entity. It's a 501c3, and it exists separate and apart from the school district. It partners with the schools and the athletic program in spring, and the town club competes as a Guilford High School crew team in the spring crew season. Much of their funding comes through the fees that are charged to be a member of the club. And in very large part, that is because crew is a very expensive program. An 8-person shell could cost $50,000 to $100,000. And so it is a very different program than the programs that we run. Even beyond that, we fund almost all of the other athletic programs to the level that we feel would be appropriate to fund those programs. Then there are a lot of really generous booster and parent organizations in the community that support our programs. The first one that comes to mind is the lacrosse Boosters Club. The Lacrosse Booster Program raises money every year and funds 2 additional assistant coaching positions. Now, we would view those over and above what is necessary, but it is certainly beneficial to the program to have those additional coaching positions. If all of the booster activity and volunteerism in Guilford dried up and ended today, you would see lower coaching numbers, you would see equipment beginning to age, you would see athletes who weren't necessarily getting extra spirit every year on top of the uniforms that we provide and that they return at the end of the school year. So the boosters do provide what we would recognize as essential support to the programs, but it isn't what we would define as necessary in order to provide the programs. I apologize that that's such a complicated answer, but Guilford Athletics is a complicated beast.
Well, again, there's 2 head, just going by what,
Yes.
very helpful, by the way, the head coaches, just go to lacrosse, 2 head coaches that are funded. Then there's 7 assistant coaches, but 3 are paid by boosters. So if they want those 3, they could pay for them.
Yes.
But the other 4 are based on the need, and understanding lacrosse, there is a need for additional coaches based on the sport. It's just like
And
like
you know,
football
for some of our,
and
you know,
hockey.
for some of our teams, you've got a varsity, you've got a JV, you've got a
Right.
freshman
Freshman,
team.
yes.
I mean,
Right.
you know, so again, it's not
So anything over and above
a
that.
team, right?
Yeah.
And our athletic director, Mr. Jake Jarvis, with Dr. Freeman, did a presentation to the board, I want to say at our January 29th meeting, which was fairly detailed, trying to really break down some of the sports, because we as a board have been very interested in the question as well.
Thank you.
I was looking at the HVAC custodial, 1 FTE,
Yep.
and you noted that it was going to have credit on safety and sanitation line of 90,000. But when I went there, it looked like it was only about 22,000 down.
Building maintenance.
The offsets in the building maintenance line. Thank you
Okay.
again, Linda.
I think that cleared it up.
Yep.
Yep.
Should I keep going? I got a few more.
Okay, for him? Okay. Yep, good.
I was looking at professional and tech services, and it looked like it was up about 51,000 for other consultants. What are the new consultants, and what are they doing?
Just give us one moment. please.
Yeah, that one's a little deeper in the budget.
Right?
Yeah, I believe it was in the
Yep, in the packet.
60 some odd questions that were answered.
Who can find it?
Yes.
This is the,
Oh, I think I found it. Special education study?
Question number 5.
I think it might be for special
So in
education
question number
study.
5, we've built in a table for you
Yep,
showing
right
over
here.
3 years.
Okay, you know, my question was specifically about the increase, but I think I do see in question 19, someone's asking a similar question.
That's right, I'll open it up, thank you.
And it's the special education study?
Yes, we
Yes.
have contracted this year for a special education study of our pre-K through 4 special education services, yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about the tank, the oil tank. You kind of answered that it's going to need to be replaced, and I was just wondering, how old is it? You know, how did you make that assessment?
Mr. Gurnham made that recommendation to get you, I can get you a more detailed answer to that. And Mr. Gurnham suggested that it both needed to, we increased the size of the tank and the tank needed to be replaced as well.
I think it was one that was taken from the old high school, so it's not new.
No.
It's not a new tank, it was taken out of the high school and put in Jones, when we had to remove it when we built the new school. But it's at the end of its useful life, and we want to replace it
Before it
we have
fails.
a failure, because a failure of an oil tank is disastrous.
Yeah, didn't the existing tank fail?
Yeah.
So
That's why
that,
they-
so it was
Believe so,
temporarily,
correct.
It was.
and now that
Yes.
is getting to the point where we gotta replace it, okay. I'm gonna ask a question. One of our favorite line items is tuition. The amount that it went up it's a 5.78% increase. And the question I have is that based on escalation of the services where the prices have increased, or is it the mandate that has been put forward regarding keeping, that you mentioned the other night, keeping the students in school? Is it both?
Correct. Right, so there may have been a certain number of students that we anticipated graduating out, and now the timeline for them aging out has changed. And so for some students, we now need to carry them longer than we had previously anticipated, in addition to many of the private providers have increased their costs.
And I think follow up that, just to make sure I'm clear, and this is actually more for the public, the number you carry in terms of number of students, we all know it can do that.
Right.
But the number of students, when you go, do you just carry that number to the next year, or do you, I honestly forgot, or is it a blended average over 3 years, or you literally just a straight number you carry through? Linda, you raised your hand, so unless Dr. Freeman wants to.
We start by moving the existing students forward that we know about, because
Right.
those are going to be closer to hard costs. So we age up all of the students that we know about.
And age out the ones that you know.
Age out anybody who we know we will confidently graduate or age out of the system, and then build in a contingency. And we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday. We know that there are going to be students who might move into the district with existing needs. There may be students who have emergent needs that come up. So we first move everybody forward, that's the foundation, and then we build in a contingency. At times, the contingency can be informed, because at times we can see, we are already in conversation with families, we're already supporting students, and we can project that there may be a possible outplacement or greater support in a child's future. And at times, it's just a pure contingency for things that we don't see coming yet.
And along the same lines, just to follow up, contracted services is going up in this budget, and that is different from tuition in the sense that that's outplacement or sending this special needs student to a school, whereas contracted services may also serve a special needs student, but it's I don't know if it's necessarily in-house, it may be outside of the school, but it is in addition to the services they're getting while they may be attending school, but they're getting additional services that the district is unable to provide at the present. And so
Correct.
And so my question is the 130 similar to what Chairman Ailes was asking? Is that based on a projection, or is that kind of, because I'm looking at this year's budget and the burn rate is a little faster than we had budgeted for? Is that kind of saying, okay, we need to correct from what we had last year, or are you looking down the road and saying, all right, along the same lines, we see some students who are going to require outplace or contracted services that they're presenting in a way that we can pretty much figure that that's what's going to happen?
Yes, again, it's all of the above. So the same logic applies. We may know that we have students who are drawing that support in district this year. Next year, they move from grade A to grade B, and they're going to continue to need that service. So that becomes the foundation. We build in cost escalation from the service providers with whom we contract, and then we build in that contingency for the increases that we may not know of, but we can anticipate.
I mean, we've talked about it a number of times in our meetings, but I think it's helpful, again, for the public to hear that while there has been a huge amount of progress in terms of keeping special needs students in district, the school district can't provide, this is just me speaking, the school district can't provide all of the needs all the services to address some of these needs.
Right.
No matter how effective we become at providing special services to our special needs students, there's always going to be some children who are going to be outsourced. There's always going to be some students who are going to require contracted services. That's just, and we have the legal responsibility
To
to
do that.
provide
That's
those
right.
services for those students.
That's exactly right. We are responsible for providing a free and appropriate public education to every child with a Guilford address. And when that stretches our ability as a school district, we may at times contract specialists in to help us provide it locally, and there will always be a certain number of students where we acknowledge that they will be better served at a more special program than we can offer in district, and that's when we engage with the tuition outplacement.
What's your most onerous unfunded mandate?
That's a good question.
Where do we begin?
What bothers you the most?
I think, well, the unfunded part, the excess cost grant.
Yeah.
It's never been fully funded. They've never, the state has never met 100% of our excess
We were at
costs.
68.1% of the 100% that they're supposed to fund. So that's the unfunded part that drives me crazy.
You know any lawyers?
Right now, that the funding, the mandate to age 22, and the timing of when that was implemented, because we could not prepare for that, is one of the ones that's causing us some problems right now. Tuition line, contracted services line are both impacted by that, as well as transportation.
How many students are not aging out that would have aged out?
I believe it's 6 this year that we still have in district that wouldn't have been.
And in large part, we're excited to have the opportunity to continue to work and to provide
Support
for
them,
those
yeah.
students and support those students. We just hadn't planned financially on doing that, right? And so we will make the adjustment, but that becomes part of the increase that we put in front of you. And if the state every year met the promise of excess costs, then the budgets that we bring before you would look different.
So at the other end of the spectrum, now that you're getting, are you expecting a decrease in the number of kindergarten students since the enrollment age has gone up to September 1st?
No.
No.
And what the state changed is the state changed the automatic enrollment date for students. The state also said that any parent whose child doesn't meet that automatic date has the ability to appeal to the school district, and the school district should conduct an assessment of that student and determine whether or not they are ready for enrollment in kindergarten, and if they are ready, then the school should still enroll that child. So we don't think that it's going to have any significant or measurable reduction to, not all in 1 year. I think over years, as younger parents now begin to adjust and they start thinking from the birth date to age 5, that it's a different expectation. And it might have some mitigating factor against that increase that the demographic, but we will see no reduction from this year to next year in kindergarten enrollment because of that. Parents are already reaching out to us for students who fall within the gray area. Most of those students have been growing up in Guilford homes with lots of texts that are available, with highly educated parents who have access to all sorts of preschool and early school-like activities. And the fact is those students are ready. And so we will be admitting them even though, now the state didn't change the date. They only changed the automatic enrollment date and then built in a tool for the schools to decide.
No, I was just going to comment, the same conversation we had earlier with Amy's question about, where do you find the money to cover it? 6 students that you thought were going to age out are not aging out, and now you have to provide a free and appropriate education for them. So that's a bunch of money that you didn't budget for, didn't know you were going to have to, and now you have to find it. So I mean, I think that's, like I said, a comment about what some of the issues are that you're faced with.
Well, and I think that is important. Oftentimes, we will hear comment that It's a $70 million budget. There's got to be room to cut. But we know that every year there are always unanticipated expenses. And so, yes, the size of the budget allows us to absorb the unanticipated expenses that come up every year. And I don't know that anybody can remember the last time that the school district had to come to the town and ask for an additional appropriation because we weren't going to close the books within our budget. But if that starts with a premise that it's a big budget, you can cut from the get-go and you should find ways to absorb that, then it becomes next to impossible to absorb the unexpected expenditures that come up during the year because you don't have any lines that are running under budget. They're all running over budget, and then what happens is the schools end up coming to the town mid-year asking for an additional appropriation.
Is it fair to say, based on information received by us, that the last 2 years, under $10,000 of the budget
Was returned.
was returned?
Yes.
Each year?
Yep.
And I'll go one step further. This board fully anticipated the board having to come to us
back
for
to
an
us.
appropriation over COVID,
And we didn't.
and you didn't.
We were watching it very
we all were.
closely. Definitely
No.
as board chair, it was a very wonderful thing not to have to do that, but I was surprised that we didn't end up in
Yeah.
the
It was-
position to come back to this board to seek additional funds. So, that's right.
Yeah.
Other questions?
I had a question about the Lake psychologist. Is there only one psychologist at Lakes, or are there two?
I believe there's more than one currently assigned to Lakes, but again, as I responded in the written response, it's important to remember that Lakes, while it has the absolute largest population K through 4 of any of our neighborhood schools, it additionally supports 2 district-wide special education-focused programs. It supports the pre-K program, which is a program that provides special education services to students who are identified with needs before they enroll in kindergarten. So they are our youngest population of students with special needs. Additionally, it supports a district-wide program for students who may have behavioral or functional challenges. So again, these would be students that we would have been outplacing previously that we're now keeping in our schools. So Lakes draws additional school psychologists, social worker support, as well as speech and language support because of those 2 district-wide programs.
So I was curious about the demand. Are the teachers and the students in elementary school requesting a lot of engagements with psychologists? The answer I got was that's not how it works, and that they're doing things, meeting with classrooms. Like, I was curious if the students and the parents have the demand for the psychologists.
So yes, but it's larger than that. A school psychologist doesn't work like a fireman. So a school psychologist doesn't sit in an office and wait until somebody has a crisis and then only respond to that crisis. They don't just schedule appointments the way a private therapist or counselor might schedule appointments. So school psychologists are involved in delivering, scoring, educational assessments. So they will be assessing and testing students for both social and academic needs, scoring those assessments, then meeting with the parents and the teachers to go over those assessments. They meet with teachers to help teachers develop classroom strategies for the students who are mainstreamed into regular classrooms. They do meet with students who may be experiencing a crisis. They also meet with students both individually and in small groups to do skill building. And at times, our school psychologists are working with whole classes of students. So they're doing social skill building with our youngest students in a classroom setting so that we're developing the skills so that they don't have crises later on. It's just not accurate to think of them the way you think of a private counselor or therapist who schedules appointments with people who are asking to schedule those appointments. They're certified teachers in the state of Connecticut. They
I was
work
just
like teachers.
More curious, are we just doing that, or are the parents actually requesting that we do that? And do the parents have the ability to opt out if they don't want to have an assessment?
So yes, no parent has to submit their child to an educational evaluation. More often
Wait a
than
minute,
not,
educational or psychological?
Both.
it's both. And oftentimes the
The
parents,
psychologist does the educational part, or wouldn't the teacher do that?
no, school psychologists provide academic assessments for our students to identify if they have a learning disability that had previously been unidentified. School psychologists are the ones who primarily deliver those evaluations. No parent has to submit to an evaluation that we might recommend. The reality in Guilford is that most of the assessments that we conduct are done at parental request. Parents are concerned about whether or not their children are being successful. They're asking for the evaluations, and we are seeing the number of those requests going up significantly.
Do you know how many there were?
I can get you
at
that
Lakes?
information. Not
You know,
off-
because I thought the population was small, and then it's odd for me, you know, to think of elementary school kids having a lot of problems. but
Oh, that,
Maybe
we're
they,
seeing-
maybe they are.
yeah,
but
no, Jonathan,
In
one
my
of the
day, I was worried about, you know, getting outside for recess and
It's
stuff
a
like
diff-
that.
It is a different world.
It's just, and we
I'm
are
gonna
seeing.
stop that
We
conversation.
in
Really.
Guilford and we in
Now I gotta
Connecticut
start.
and we in the United States are seeing a significant increase in mental health and behavioral issues. We were seeing it before the pandemic, and the pandemic only exacerbated the problem. But you
That's
should
what I
feel
was
free
looking-
to contact any pediatrician in this town. They
Yep.
will tell you the same thing.
But that's what I was looking for, how many parents are requesting the services?
More than before, and I can get those numbers from Mr. Scanziano. I think one of them, I'm going to go way outside my purview. I think one of the most exciting things in the budget that sits in front of the community tonight is the embedded social worker with the police department. I told Lynn on Tuesday night that I think that that is one of the most exciting things that we are doing. Schools began embedding social workers and psychologists in the school setting decades ago because we recognize that students learn best when they can be socially, emotionally, mentally available for learning. And so it's not a nice to have, it's not an extra, it's essential to students being able to learn effectively in the schools to be able to meet those social and emotional needs that they have.
Is it fair to say that the school psychologists that we're talking about are proactive, not reactive?
Yes, that's probably a much shorter version of my answer, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that to you.
No, I appreciate it, I need all the help I can get, thank you.
And I think, Jonathan, that's even a factor for parents as they're deciding whether or not to send their kids to kindergarten or not, because there's a whole generation of kids that were isolated, then wore masks at daycare or preschool, and so that, it's not just the academic, but it's the social emotional delays that they've had.
And I'm afraid that you all have heard me say this before, so I'll apologize for the duplication. We as a Board of Ed have the opportunity every year to have a meeting with a group of teachers in Guilford Public Schools that span the buildings and span fields of study, fields of their teaching areas. And in year 3 following the pandemic, we heard masks are off, kids are back full-time. It is harder this year than ever before. And this past year, we heard, particularly from our elementary teachers, but certainly across the board, the behavior problems they're seeing and the numbers of kids who are struggling with behavior as well as other issues continues and increases. So these things are really challenges for our teachers, and we really need the psychologists, the social workers supporting them, supporting the kids, because it is just an increasing problem year over year.
Other,
I have
Megan?
a minor question, but is this the year that you'll launch Open Choice?
Yes.
Okay.
We have informed ACES that we will have seats available for first graders for open choice this coming September. A year out, we expect to then have seats in first, as well as that group that graduates to second and fifth. A year out from that, we will then have first, second, third, fifth, and sixth, and offer ninth grade seats for the first time. So it begins very small next year and then grows almost exponentially over the next 3 to 4 years.
Others?
I was asking if you could quantify how much money you spend on initiatives like equity, social justice, diversity, inclusion. And I was curious, do you think the partners of educational leadership dues might fall under that? It seems like they are involved with that. Their core beliefs are equity, inclusion, cultural responsibility, the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Network, social justice, justice in terms of distribution, opportunities, outcomes, and privileges. Would that be money that's spent on those initiatives?
So I would answer that, and it's the reason that I said that it's impossible to break out those initiatives or those dollars, and I would lump Partners for Educational Leadership into that. They're an organization that offers support in a number of different places. At times, we work with them in things that are very instructional. This year, we're part of a networked improvement community with them and a number of other school districts that is really doggedly focused on mathematics instruction. And in those settings, no, we're not talking a lot about equity or diversity or social justice. We're talking about mathematics instruction. I have been a member of a superintendent's network that Partners runs, and I've been part of that since before I came to Guilford. At times we talk about issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, justice. At times we talk about leadership, hiring and retention, talk about things that have nothing to do with those topics. So no, I wouldn't say that the dues that we pay to Partners is exclusively something that fits into any of those buckets that you named. Some of it often does, and that ratio will change year to year based on what we're doing with
About
them.
the cost of the Family Equity Liaison, is that part of those initiatives, or?
So the cost for the Family Equity Liaison would be specifically, yes.
At this point, we still have to go through the town.
That's like, ah!
We're going to the town.
We're not going anywhere, we'll be here.
If
should
we
you
put the
think of
Board of
anything else.
Education through this, Board of Selectmen get it.
We're staying, we're not going here.
So, if there are any, what I'm going to ask, the Board of Finance has numerous questions, a lot of these questions, I think some of them, if not most of them, that we've all been asking, we know, but we also want the public to know.
No,
Totally
appreciate
get that,
that.
we appreciate that.
But at this point, I would say, if we've had a question that's been asked and answered, which we have, I forgot the number, but was it 66? Over 60 questions. If they've been answered, I'd like to move on. If that's okay with the board, unless there's anything burning, I'd like to move on to the town. We good?
I think
Thank
I
you
only
again
have
for your
one
time
more
tonight.
anyway.
What's that?
I think I have one more if there's time.
There's one, if you have one more, that'll be the last question for the Board of Education.
Is it okay? Want to entertain one more?
I'm happy to, I'll stay here all night, John.
I was doing a back of the envelope calculation, and it was about staffing that's really not in the teacher salary line. And I came up with a number that's probably not perfect, but it says that about a quarter of the money we spend on the teacher salaries is basically spent on the other staff, clerical, administrative, psychologists, social workers, etc.
Non-certified.
Is that, you feel that that number is okay? I mean, it was higher than I thought it would be, personally.
So I would have to sit down and try to do some of the numbers that you just suggested,
Yep.
but it wouldn't surprise me. So teachers are the single largest number of employees. If we suggest that we have 600 employees, teachers probably make up 380 of those 600 employees. But then there are significant numbers of custodians, clerical positions, lunch staff, monitors positions, paraprofessionals, nurses. We hire a lot of people who aren't necessarily certified teachers. But teachers make up the bulk of our staff, and teachers, and then I'll lump into that certified professionals, so I'm talking about certified administrators as well, will also rate as most of our highest paid employees when they've been here long enough to make it to the top of the teacher scale. So teachers will be the biggest lump, but it doesn't surprise me that 20% or a quarter of our salaries go to non-certified employees. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
That was it.
All right.
Thank you.
One more.
Okay. We will now continue with
Welcome.
Mary Jane Malvasi, First Selectman Matt Hoey on town budget. I would like to start.
Well,
I'm going to take,
do,
I'm going to
good.
take the privilege of starting on this one.
executive privilege.
Capital. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to phrase this, so bear with me. I looked at the capital, but first of all, you mentioned on Tuesday night the capital line is flat, virtually flat. However, when I looked at the number, and I'll be darned now if I, hold on, I could probably find it real quick, because you had provided the capital information. There was a lot cut out that were capital requests. Part of my question is, of the Board of Selectmen, how did you make the determination to get to that number? That's number one. And number two, I saw numerous capital items that were in, and by the way, there were, a lot of this is also, this could be bonded. So I do realize that, but a lot of the capital items that were in the report, we also heard in November, and a lot of them got pushed. And I guess it's both a concern and a question of how did you determine how to get that number where it is? I think as a board, we all realize the capital line needs to keep up, and you mentioned that very clearly on Tuesday night. But what happens in the future when you've got capital numbers of 9 million, 5 million, and this year we're at one, whatever the number is, just over 1 million?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. The process is one that is pretty fluid. When we look at a capital budget, and I think on one of the sheets I showed the other day, the original capital request to the Board of Selectmen was over $2 million. And as you probably recall, we have a 5-year capital plan project that we update consistently. It is a moving target, and obviously the Board of Selectmen has felt that $2 million is a little bit rich for any operating budget. So we have utilized a couple of methodologies to sort of spread that out over time. The first and foremost is to talk to a department head and say, can you wait? Right? So, and that happens a lot. A good portion is it can wait. The next evaluation is which of these projects can wait and be part of a bond package, right? Because they're more appropriately funded through bond proceeds. And then the last area that we've been looking at, because of the windfall of American Rescue Plan, is which of these do you think we should use? We can use American Rescue Plan funds for, and largely because we're coming upon a little cliff, which is the funds have to be allocated by December 31st of this year, and they have to be spent by December 31st of 2026. So it's a combination of those factors that allow us to get to where we wound up getting to with the $1 million. MJ?
I'd just like to add one more area. We also look at other funding that
Yep.
we have. Due to the surpluses that we're able to reallocate at year end into committed funds in the fund balance. For instance, we put money aside for planning last year. Out of that, we took the requests from the Planning and Zoning Department for 4 areas of surveys and planning documents to come from that money. We've already set that money aside specifically for that. So we're taking it from there. Same thing with our reval. We have money we've set aside for that. That was part of that $2 million number. So on top of the ways that First Selectman has mentioned, we also look for the fund balance that we have, because that's what those items are for. That's how we went from 2 to 1.
Satisfied?
Yeah, I think, again, it's one of those questions that I think most of us understand, but the public also needs to hear that, you know, that capital line could have been easily, I was expecting it to be 1.2, and add a little bit more to it. And you alluded to the fact that we should do that, but it kept, again, it keeps the number down. But if we can reallocate in other ways, those capital projects and those capital issues that we have that don't go away.
They do
Then
not go away.
they don't go
and
away, just
Usually
like
they get
our
added
cars and
to,
houses, they don't go away.
There are other things that get added to it, so
Yeah.
you probably wouldn't be surprised to know that the current 5-year capital improvement plan has a total potential spend of $28 million. And we're not going to do that in 5 operating budgets.
But you'll be coming for bonding next year, so we'll see what happens.
We more than likely will.
More than likely. With $28 million, I would expect that something would happen. Thank you for the answer. Other questions for the town? Bob?
You know, I'm interested in rates and bonds, and you've been shooting the lights out as financial director on interest income. And we don't want to give people the impression you've got $25 million sitting around on an average daily balance. So can you break down where the interest income is coming from? Is some of that interest you didn't have to spend on bonds that was in the budget, or?
No, there is no bonded interest in that. That is strictly money that we have set aside. I have money in a number of investments. It's all the money of the town. So we're not talking just the money of the general fund. It's all the town's money. It encompasses No, just money we have in bank.
Committed funds?
The unallocated
All of our
fund
funds.
balance?
The ARPA fund, it has, has interest.
Yeah,
It's
I
all of our
noticed that in the
funds.
ARPA report it says interest. Yeah.
Correct, it's
Makes
everything.
sense that we have a
It's
big
everything.
pile of
So
money and we
Right.
spend it out over the years.
It's the dedicated road fund, it's the land acquisition fund, it's all of those funds,
And
combined.
my understanding is relatively recently, you have more options than you ever had before.
Correct. So I currently have money in special mutual funds. We have $10 million that comes due every month. $1 million comes due every month. I have the opportunity to take the money out if we need it, take the interest out if and when we need it, or to roll it over. Obviously, I try to roll that over as much as possible. We use STIF for the majority of our liquid money, I'll call it, our liquid money, so that we can draw on that. STIF's rates have been phenomenal over the last few months. I haven't felt the need, as I have in the past, to take that money out of STIF and find a different avenue. We've been able to leave it in STIF because they're very competitive in their rates now. So it's a combination of all the funds that the town has, and the higher interest rates that we have. I can't say I had much less money to invest 2 years ago when I brought in $50,000.
Yeah. And that was primarily stiff, though, at the time, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. You didn't have the options that you have now.
I did not.
That's it.
SNF was like a passbook account.
Partly the interest rate environment, too.
It's really
right?
the interest rate. That's
rates
what
were
I
so
said.
low.
It's not that I had more or less money, really. It's
But you were required, you couldn't go outside.
there are very
those
strict.
boundaries,
There are very
very
strict
strict
requirements for what we can and cannot invest town's public money in.
Right, okay.
I've been around this game too long. Remember the derivative scandal out in California?
Sure.
Which basically says you don't take risk with that kind of money. You can take some risk when you're doing pension because there's a long-term recovery opportunity, but not on your reserves.
Right. All of our investments are in very low risk. Very low. Yeah.
Yeah.
The risk is a drop in interest rate. It's not a loss of any principal. We'd not lose any principal in any of the investment strategies that I use.
What's the longest term you can go out?
Don't know if there's a
Okay.
cap
we can
for
find it.
that.
We can find it.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, if we think the rates are gonna drop next year, and we feel kind of full of cash, then what do we do?
Well, one of the reasons we might not go really long-term
No.
is that we fund an awful lot of projects, all the bonded projects, we fund those internally until such time as we go out to the marketplace. So we need to have that cash reserve as liquid. Now, you know, what's liquid? 3 months, we know a project is coming
see 'em
along.
coming.
So, yeah, we can see them coming. So, but you're right, that kind of analysis is probably well warranted.
Right. Thank you.
Other questions?
I got a question.
Go ahead, come on.
I always got a question.
Of
right?
course you do.
All
That's
right,
it. I'd be disappointed if you
Yeah,
didn't.
exactly.
Right?
All right, so I think a little bit for the benefit of the public, a little bit, to just go over the software. The software was an item that went up a lot, and what I'm kind of interested in is the cost-benefit analysis of the new software. I'm sorry, my notes are not perfect, but
That's
I think
all right.
it's EverGov is really the
Energov.
big.
Energov.
EnerGov is the big one.
Yep.
And maybe if you could just explain why we're
That-
buying it and where the
This
benefits
is an
gonna be.
online permitting system, which is going to create efficiencies for our staff, as well as conveniences for the general public in processing permits, the multitude of permits that exist in our land use departments. Many communities throughout the Connecticut and throughout the country have already gone to that, to electronic permitting, fully electronic permitting. We are in the middle of a conversion to electronic permitting. I had hoped to potentially say that we were going to make a date sometime in April on a go live, but we've had a little bit of a setback, and it's now been pushed out to probably early June. And this is a tool that will allow us to be more efficient in processing permits. And I think I shared the other day the significant increase. It's almost double the revenue since 2020 that we're getting in through permits. So the workload has increased dramatically, and the paper flow is just overwhelming. Going digital is clearly the way to go. This administration made that decision 3 or 4 years ago, and we're, as I said, you know, as I'm often fond of saying, government works at a glacial pace, and it takes a while to get things done, but we're anticipating a June go-live date on it.
Okay, and this is tracking building permits, right?
This building, health, planning and zoning, what else we've got?
Natural
And
resources.
Natural
applications for variances and
resources.
stuff?
It's a workflow.
Yeah.
It's a workflow through all of our land use offices. Many permits need a sign off by every department in the building. So, you know, the way we were currently doing it, I got this piece of paper and I'm gonna leave it on your desk because you're the next person to sign, and then you don't see it for a week, and so Bob's never gotten it. Now, where is that piece of paper? This is a workflow that's going to keep that moving. It's gonna send you an email that it's your turn. Everyone's gonna know whether you've done it or not, because it has to get to Bob next. So it should be better for our residents and the contractors that come to Town Hall South, and better for our employees.
And make application beyond after 4:30 at night, if they can.
Correct.
If they don't have to race to get to Town Hall South before
And
the
it
doors
will
close.
also help us meet the statutory required timelines and turning things around, which we are not always able to do.
And Jonathan, just before you go on.
Yeah, I got a twist on that. a
Well,
little bit.
and I want to just explain what happens. I'm not going to mention any cities or towns. What happens when you don't have the system anymore? Towns are moving to the system, but Mary Jane is exactly right. When you're trying to do business in a town and you're constantly badgering, and I'm not going to even, town engineer, building official, fire marshal, you're going through all that entire process, at least on our end, on the design industry, and then you're trying to get permits to close the project, and it's sitting on people's desks. No one would want to do business in that town or city. It's frustrating. So it's another, it's an economic development thing too, is that who wants to do business in a town that it takes you 6 months or 4 months to get a permit or get any kind of approvals? It's crazy. And so this was a really welcome change that we decided to do 3 or 4 years ago. And there's going to be a little bit of cost and pain
And
and
it will.
training and education, but in the long run, this is going to make everything run much, much smoother, and people want to be here.
Absolutely, thank you very much for pointing out, this is not going to be easy, there will be hiccups along the way, it'll be pain points, we'll have to make adjustments. There's nothing, I've been through data conversion, data project conversions in the past, never one went the way we thought it was going to go.
Right, but there's value to the outside world for the people who work within that world.
Yep.
There's value to the town if you're saying, hey, there's been a glitch, but we're trying to make it better for you, and people will appreciate that at least it's not going to be a slip of paper and so-and-so's on vacation, so I've got to wait for them to come back to sign this thing
And
find it.
I theoretically can't wait to not get a call that said, I've been waiting on a permit for 3 weeks, and I have to go back over to Town Hall South and say, hey, where is this? But I can't go online and say, oh, it's waiting for this, it's waiting for that. Not that I need to make my life easier with the system, but that happens regularly. So I have to send an email out to all the department heads over there. Who's got this application and where is it?
And I don't think any of us are trying to minimize the amount of work that the town hall staff have. It's not as though they're not trying to tend to these things. They're also being pulled in many different directions, and they just can't get to it as quickly as they'd like
That's why this is going to be a benefit to the employees as well.
Right.
They'll be more efficient in their job.
Yeah, good.
So will the efficiency finally pay off? There'll be like some kind of reduction in staff, because this is about, what, $100,000?
I don't anticipate any reduction in staff, Jonathan. People still need to look at those permits online, regardless of whether it's a piece of paper or online. It's just going to make their jobs easier. We're going to shorten the window, response times for our residents and their contractors. So this is going to have benefits to the larger community. I do not anticipate it's going to wind up saving any staff.
This is an investment in our employees. It's a tool for them to use to be more efficient for themselves and the public.
But I will tell you this, if it does manifest itself in that people don't have enough work to do, we'll make adjustments as needed. We'll do those kind of assessments.
Those folks still need to go out and look at the buildings.
Well, some of them do, yeah. But the admins, this is largely going to be on the administrative burden. That'll be the biggest impact, is on the
It
administrative.
shortens the time between departments, not the time spent in the department.
Right.
So it's much more professional. We've all been through this.
You okay?
Yep.
With that one?
Yep.
Okay, good, thank you.
Can you talk about the issue with, you're talking about permitting and stuff, and the need to have someone in the WPCA department for,
Septic.
thank you, septic, I was gonna say sewer,
Right.
but septic.
We have a resource in place. We put that resource in place
Yeah.
last year. And they're slowly starting to work through the backlog of those. And that will be something that will also be automated, so that you're going to get, it's going to generate a letter that gets sent out to your house. I don't think I've had one of those in 5 years, which means I'm probably due for a pump out. Nobody else can say that they've had theirs do it. But that's the kind of efficiency that this system will have. Once the data, we have field cards right now on when's the last pump out at 32 Seaview Terrace. And I'm not going to say when it was, but it is probably overdue. And they have just not been able to stay on top of getting those notifications out. So.
Other questions for the town?
So this one may not be a home run, but I'm just curious. The town's got some buses. Is there any overlap with the Board of Education that we could do to get their special ed students anywhere? They're spending $1.7 million to do that. And I assume the driver would need some special training, or maybe the vehicle has to be empty. I don't know. I'm just curious if there's any overlap. Maybe someone's just going
I think the other night, I explained we're moving the number of driving hours from 96 to 106. So you divide 106 over the course of 5 days. That's 20 plus hours. No, it's 25, 26 hours per bus that we have out on the road today. So those buses are being used regularly for the purposes that they were purchased for, through the grants that we've been able to attain. Terry Holland Buckley, who runs the senior program, does a phenomenal job of finding the opportunities for grant money. And if we do that, then if we were to have the capacity to do that, run kids in the morning before seniors need to get to doctor's appointments or grocery shopping or come to the community center for breakfast and lunch, we would significantly reduce the lifespan of those 4 20-passenger buses that we have currently in operation. Those buses, their lifespan is less than 30,000 miles.
Thought I'd throw it out there.
No, it's a
There's probably
good
a million
question.
regulations that would keep us from doing it.
Good question. Good question.
Probably
But
might have
now,
some buses.
Jonathan, we use those buses for some of the senior
Yeah.
social activities,
So the
or
senior buses,
the
we
buses.
usually prefer.
They're not just for driving people around town. They'll use those to take them to a program at at the Cape, or go to a museum in Hartford. So those buses do get used for a variety of reasons, other than just point-to-point shuttles for seniors and those with disabilities. It's both those. It's not just the seniors. It's a good question, though.
I have one last question.
Okay.
And then I don't know about this side or both sides. Tuesday night, you had mentioned that medical came up and there was going to be a meeting. I'm not expecting any numbers, but how did the meeting go? Was it positive in terms of the medical numbers? And when do we think we're going to hear about those? Because we know we're not going to hear about them tonight because the meeting just happened. But was it a positive meeting, number one? And number two, when do we find out when the medical numbers because we know they're not officially yet, but they're estimated right now based on our best estimates, so.
Well, I was not part of that meeting, but it's been reported to me that it's positive. There is a chance that we're gonna see some drop. Nothing definitive has been officially transmitted to us at this point. What we have done is the Board of Selectmen has moved their decision meeting about if you guys apply cuts to us, where they would be. We've moved that to our meeting on December 18th, our regular Board of Selectmen meeting on December 18th.
Or March.
March. December.
We got a long time to think about it between now and December.
I'm gonna say, that's way out there, wow, okay. We got you.
It's okay, we can
So, Christmas, yeah, right in time for Christmas season. We anticipate having, and actually, both Mitch and Mary Jane have been pushing our consultant, Joe Spurgeon, very hard to get those numbers. But as I think you recall, those
And
numbers
Linda.
are based, and Linda as well,
And
I'm sorry,
Linda.
Linda. Those numbers are based on some actuals. They do their projections based on actuals, and they're still pulling data in, is my understanding.
We have gone out to bid this year for medical, so our consultant is currently talking with the bidders, but preliminary numbers we see, we're most likely going to
I would think
have a
that they
reduction.
would be based on what the trend has been in the history.
Correct.
But that's
Yep.
good to know. I mean, we're not gonna find out anything for a little bit, so,
Yeah.
okay. Bob, did you, yeah, go ahead.
And Paul, you said something that reminded me. Along the way, you hinted a little bit that revenues might be a little higher in some areas.
Absolutely.
And it's not, I don't think it's this body's ability to bake in anything higher that we're not formally apprised of. We're stiffened up a little bit. So while we're all sitting here, are there a couple of 3 things that you can tell us that might come in a little higher?
Interest income,
Yep. About how much?
double.
Touche.
I have a $500,000 budget in 2024. I'm expected to,
You're at 750-ish now.
I'm anticipating 1.1.
Yeah.
We budgeted 750 for 2025. I kept that number a little conservative, not knowing where interest rates might go. Certainly, you're welcome to raise my risk level if you'd like.
We're not saying you're sandbagging. I just want to know. It helps us to know.
Yeah, and I think we did discuss that the last time.
Yeah,
and-
we did. And, again, you guys, what you feel comfortable with, but the honest projection right now is between 1.1 and 1.2 million.
Yeah.
And we're also forecasting out 16 or 17 months, 16 months now, right, on this budget cycle. So in terms of interest rates, and a lot can change during that timeframe. I would think that you guys could easily go get 100 to 150 on that side, from 750 to 9, which is sort of splitting the baby, right? Splitting the middle there, right?
Permits, anything else?
Permits, I think we're going to stay flat. The capacity, just the capacity to get things done. Plus, I think there will eventually be a post-COVID slowdown. I don't know when that will happen.
Yep.
I think you have some opportunity at emergency services, the fire department, and I think you could probably go get 100 there if you needed it.
Right?
Where I sitting on that side, which I did for a bunch of years, I would have felt comfortable with making those kind of assumptions, and we did at different times.
Yeah, and looking at that, I think there's definitely some room there. Where we allocated or where we put the higher numbers in will be something I think we just need to discuss out, make sure we're comfortable with it, but, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
I got one more.
One more, go ahead.
I have to say the budget overall is kind of coming in conservatively at 2.99%, considering that inflation was slightly higher at 3 something.
Yeah.
But, right, but I still noticed doing just a little bit of analysis about 53 budget lines that went up by 5% and maybe 15, 16 that went up by over 10%. Is there a little more room to tighten the belt?
Well, it depends on which lines you're talking about. If they are salary line items, no, there's no move. We have contractual obligations along those lines, and some of them. Well, here's one in particular in IT. We went up 61%. Well, if you want to take off some security software, we could certainly entertain some of those things, but those are in there for a reason. Yeah, Jonathan, we could nickel and dime every line item in this budget, all right, and say, okay, we need to take, a 0.25% from every budget, all right, but the impact would be felt somewhere.
All right, thank you.
But along those lines, as far as software and security, it came up the other night as a public comment. We are, and without specifics, because I know we don't want to do that, but we are addressing insurance coverage for cyber security and things like that.
That is
On
part-
both
that-
Board of
that-
Ed and
That is a component of our security plan.
yeah, yeah. Okay.
Anyone else?
Anyone else?
One last thing, I brought it up like a million times, but it ended up not being 2 SRO officers this year. It's only going to be 1. Is that right?
It's correct.
I got that a little wrong.
I believe it was September of 2022. We sat down together, Dr. Freeman, Dr. Balistraci, myself, Chief Hyatt, and Deputy Chief Massey, and we put a plan in place based on the concerns that the school district had relative to security. And you may remember that was on the heels of some national tragedies, national tragedy. And the administration was getting pressure from certain quarters of our community that we needed to address security. At that point, we walked through a variety of scenarios. You heard Dr. Freeman talk about it a little bit earlier, that we were not necessarily going to be putting, it was against his belief that we should put armed guards in every school. So that's where those hall monitors, security monitors, whatever the title is, was talked about. But at the time, the conversation was the SRO that was at the high school has been a very valuable member of the school staff for a long time, and it seemed appropriate for us to add to that. So we walked through the thing, walked through the process, and the chief at the time said, we'd love to be able to give you 2 SROs right now, but we don't think we can find them. And we can get bodies in here. We all know the challenges with recruitment and retention of police officers and firefighters. So we made the commitment to do it over 2 years. So the 2023, that was in the fall of 2022, when we crafted the budget for 23-24, we included 1 SRO. with a commitment that we would fund a second SRO for 24, 25, and that's what you see here today.
And one additional this.
It's one additional this year, one additional last year, and the rationale is as I've just described.
So the total of 3.
There will be 3
But there's-
total, but there's been
there's only
one
one.
for as long as I've been, well, as long as I can remember, it's been an SRO.
So 3 budgeted,
Right.
3 budgeted, but one filled.
There are 2 budgeted this year, but only one of those 2 is filled. There will be 3 budgeted next year, and we hope that by the end of the year, we can fill all 3. I don't anticipate all 3 will be filled in September 1.
Is the budget prorated at all for that savings of?
No.
There's no.
Because I'll take them all tomorrow if we can find
But,
them.
sure.
We're not defunding the police in this town.
Tell everybody.
Anything further? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, as always.
Okay, so, next step, now that there's no further questions, we can discuss where we think we want to go with the budgets and what we want to forward to a town meeting, hopefully tonight. I will open it up to whoever wants to provide their thoughts and comments first.
Sure, I'll go if you
Okay?
want.
No, not at all.
So I just want to thank the Board of Education, Dr. Freeman, the principals, department heads, and on the education side, and
Linda Trudeau.
Linda Trudeau, yeah. And on the town side, Mary Jane, First Selectman Hoy, the department heads.
I think these budgets are a reflection of the effort of the administrators and the staff to provide quality service to the citizens of our town while being mindful of the impact of the increases of costs that all of Guilford's taxpayers are facing. Most of the increase in the Board of Education side is for salaries and existing services. Several of the investments that are in the budget are already for positions that are already serving our students in our community. As I've mentioned many times, my belief is teacher time is the scarcest resource in our district. And I think that this budget reflects a commitment to providing more resources to our teachers to allow them to spend more time with more students, which is what ultimately the goal of the education system is all about. I do think that there's room for reduction, not from my perspective, tremendous reduction. I would propose a reduction of a little over of $220,000. My thought process to that is looking at the new investments. From my perspective, the less immediate the increases that would have a less of a direct impact in the classroom, this is not to suggest in any way that these aren't worthwhile goals to pursue, but I look at the safety monitor, I look at the drama teacher, I look at the ice time and the pool time and the coaches, and I see those as areas, and we don't have any ability to line item the Board of Education budgets, but that's how I arrived at that number. So I think it's a budget, but that would be my proposal, that we reduce the Board of Education by $220,000. On the town side, their budget is a much smaller component of the tax burden for our citizens. I think that there's room in the town side for a reduction of $120,000. So my proposal is we make reductions in the budget of $340,000. So that's my thoughts.
Okay,
May I?
thank you.
Just to put some of this into perspective, especially in the Board of Ed, it's just to reassure anybody, it sounds like a lot of money, 220, but out of $72 million, it equates to 27 hours of the year on a 365-day year. I know that there's plenty of, it's not all that much, it's 0.3%. I agree with Mr. Beatty that there's plenty of, there's so many moving pieces, I think but there are some things there that in a year where we've gone up well, 2 years ago, 518, 478. We're now looking at 508. It'd be marvelous to get this just under 5%. This gets you just under 5%, I believe, 4.99 something. It's a little bit optics, but it's reasoned, and I agree.
So, interesting, because in the way I was taking my notes and looking at all this, I don't necessarily disagree with those numbers. I would echo everything that's already been said about the thoughtfulness of this, of both budgets, by the way. I am in the 200 camp on the school and 100 on the town. My concern with the 200, and I'm going to reiterate what Mr. Beatty said, which is we can't tell the Board of Education where to make their reductions. However, I truly hope that athletics and that line is not one of them. The reason I'm saying that is because I don't know what the percentage is, and it's not that important, but the majority of people that came out for the Board of Education budget were all about athletics. And you listen to your constituents. So the Board of Education, I think it's the, for this budget, and the note I wrote was 261,000 was cut by the, reduced by the Board of Education. 76% of the increase in the non-discretionary, of the increase was non-discretionary. That left about $840,000. It's funny that the $840 remaining was about the medical saved, which was about the amount of the investment. So that $800,000 thereabout, between 8 and 9, has been reinvested into exactly what we're concerned about. As a community, I'm not going to say just the Board of Finance, but as a community, teacher time, student time, direct touches to the students. And on the athletics, I feel that it's just as important, I'm not going to compare it necessarily, but just as important as what we're doing with social issues, mental issues. That's an outlet for kids. It's been an outlet for my kids, all of our kids' kids. I mean, athletics, and I would so far as say, if we're going to do that with athletics, again, not pointing, any direction of what the Board of Ed does. Putting drama in there is also just as important. Because I remember a time years and years ago, it was like, it was like this pitted, oh, you're going to give everything to athletics and nothing to theater. It's all important. So to invest in that way, that amount, is incredibly important. On the town side, going to 100, it's one of those things that the Board of Ed could do the same thing. It's like, take 10 departments and take $10,000 off a department and spread it around. But I'm not going to necessarily direct the Board of Selectmen in the same way. If I was feeling that it was $500,000 that could be put in, could be reduced, then maybe I'd be asked that question. But I don't have any want to go there based on the budgets that were presented. And again, I understand the needs of the Board of Education. I think getting under 5 is also optical, but really good. 200 will do it. But with the $200,000 and $100,000 reduction, we also bring the budget under whatever the number was, 4.25. We get under 4 on the actual reduction of the budgets.
I don't disagree with
and then I really want to then turn to the revenue, which you've been bringing up tonight, which I'm glad you've been bringing that up, because I think the revenue is where we could find some room to bring even more tax relief to the community. So that's my. Others? Jonathan.
So obviously I have issues again with the school. I feel like they're moving away from the focus of academics, and the expansion over the years has been in psychological services, medical services. I don't think it's the right direction. I think more money for academic teachers might actually be a better approach. The town, I think the budget is pretty tight, and they've got a difficult budget. But I do see a lot of items over 5-10%, and think there is a little bit of room to reduce. I also think if the extra revenue does come in to play, then that does make for a very large decrease in the budget. You know, we won't need that money from taxpayers if we're gonna get it from revenue. I would actually motion for a reduction of 1.2 million. I know that sounds like a big number, but that's only asking the BOE and the Board of Selectmen to save 1 penny on the dollar. That's it.
I'm not sure did you put that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Okay. Motion on the table. Do I hear a second? Okay. No second.
No second.
Motion denied, expired, whatever the terminology is.
Sales.
Fails. Thank you. Thank you. I knew you'd come up with it.
I liked expired better.
Yeah.
That's all.
Others. Megan, did you?
So so I think we have to keep in so I think both budgets are great. Lynn, great job. I was gonna make those my comments, Dr. Freeman, about the social worker embedded in the police department. I think we have to remember there's a lot of things outside of the town side and the Board of Ed side outside of their control. So we've heard about the teacher shortage, we've heard about a lot of the challenges in even recruitment and retention on both sides. And so Board of Ed already cut the budget $261,000. So if we add 200 to that, which I'm not opposed to, that's a total of $461,000 just to the Board of Ed. So we're coming in just under $500,000, which I think is reasonable, although I feel like we're kind of getting close to where we're really going to be, I think, doing a disservice to the community in terms of what the needs are. I disagree with my colleague on the board, Mr. Trotta. I think that the Board of Ed has done a really good job balancing the academic needs with the social emotional. That's not going to go away. I think as schools are expected to do more, just like police officers and firefighters and others, hence why we have the social worker now embedded in the police department, because these two systems are just being asked to do more for families across the state, whether they want to or not, and I don't think that's going away. So I would be in favor of the 200,000. I think we're getting into some dangerous territory if we go any higher than that, just based on the cumulative cut between the Board of Ed and the Board of Finance on the Board of Ed side. On the town side, I think they did a really good job. 2.99 is commendable. And do I think there's some areas? Yeah, you could obviously cut. So I think 100,000 is not going to significantly reduce any services. I would say please don't cut the social worker from the police department.
You can send that direct message to them.
Yeah, I know I can't tell you that, but just in terms of in terms of what I do for my day job, that is a huge step in the right direction, and I wish more towns would do it. There's a handful of towns in the state doing that, so under I think 10 communities in the state. So that's really exciting. That's all I have.
Just a note on that, correct me if I got it wrong, I think you can make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen that are specific if you put it in a form of motion.
You could direct the board, we could direct the Board of Selectmen through a motion.
Sure.
So you could say it's contingent on keeping
It's,
the embedded
for me,
social
it's
worker.
contingent on keeping this.
Although I think the Board of Selectmen have heard that loud and clear, so I don't think we have to necessarily mandate it.
I think they already have it in the
They
budget.
got it, yeah. Others.
I will echo a lot of what Chairman Ailes said. I think the both supporting the town who came out to talk about athletics as well as the drama teacher, I think those really speak to what we're trying to, the more outlets we have for kids like that, the fewer issues we'll have that need to go to the psychologists and the social workers and the embedded police department. So it's not, obviously, you're not going to solve that with $90,000, but I would echo hoping that that gets kept in the Board of Ed budget. I I'm optimistic with looking at the revenue side and looking at potential medical savings, that there's room to play. So I can support cuts in the realm that we've been talking about here.
Great. I was just told that we have probably now about a minute on the tape.
Oh,
And Veronica, I know you want to say something.
I'll be,
Can you do it? All right.
I'll be brief. I
All
don't
right.
disagree with
Then we'll have
anything-
everyone with bated breath in the next tape.
And don't disagree with anything that's already been said here. The budgets were really good. I don't want to see athletics cut. That was one thing we heard clearly from the public, that's a very important piece to people. I do want to support the drama because not every kid is into athletics. There are children who, you know, they're not athletic, and I
Yeah.
think that's a very important component to keep in the budget. I don't have much more to add, other than that I took part in the very deliberative conversations, in particular the Board of Ed, when they made their cuts, and the thoughts that went into each and every one of those cuts I thought was commendable, I really do. And, you know, the town is doing a very good job, 2.99%. We can't ask more than that, I don't think. So, am I under 2 minutes?
I think you're good. I would just add, if the Board of Education, I think if they felt very strongly about getting under 5, they would have. But you just didn't feel comfortable because you felt it was the right number to put forth. So I do give credit to the Board of Education coming forward with that. You know, we're going to push it under the number, but you would have done it if you could have. And this is going to be probably a struggle for the 200. But with that, we got to go to another tape. So I call them tape.